Hello and welcome. This is Laren with the Fantasy Grounds Academy. Today we're going to be doing some more homebrew. I like doing these shows. It gives a chance for people to look at some of the tools that are out there that are available to help you create your own homebrew content. I like to have basically the core rule books for whatever rule set you're in and just kind of build your own thing. The only thing about it is it takes a while to do it, and you have to have the dedication and the time for it. So I've been using AI the last few months to kind of help supplement my homebrew content, and also to see how I can get it to work for the Fantasy Grounds Unity platform. So I've made a few templates that I could use to help generate text and also parsable NPC stat block. So in the Notepad++, I've created a template. Essentially, this is what I'm going to use to help build some sort of short adventure or adventure, like a one-shot, or maybe even just a encounter for a certain game, whatever it is. So I'm going to go flip over to ChatGPT, kind of show you how this works. But this is where I started. I actually built this in a Notepad so I can have it in text format. And then I come over to a web page. I'm using a paid version of ChatGPT. I'm using 4.0, but I think 3.5 can handle all this too. So if you're using the free version, it should work too. Every once in a while, the free version will get a little bit crowded, and you might not get your content, or it might be very slow. The other thing I wanted to point out is that I'm using these tools for personal use, not for commercial use. That includes ChatGPT 4.0, and I'm also using Midjourney version 5 to create images occasionally. One of the things I found out in this journey of learning how the tools work is that you can't always get what you want from the tools. You kind of have to guide them, especially in the images department. So what I recommend doing is build an image and then build your adventure around that. It's easier than trying to shape an image around your adventure. So that's just a observation I made early on, that it's just simpler to go with it instead of fighting it. The other thing is some of these, like this one, has a paid plugins or free beta plugins. If you start relying on those and they go away or they change or you end up having to pay for them, that's another thing to keep in mind. And then I also have the latest and greatest version of Fantasy Grounds. So we're at version 4.4.2. In this situation, I'm going to use D&D 5e because it's the most known. But if you're somebody out there who likes another rule set like Pathfinder 2 or Cyberpunk or one of the other, like Traveler, you can essentially use a template like this that I've created today. At the end of the video, if I have room and it doesn't go over the amount of characters, I'll put the template there that I'm using, or at least a point to a page where it will be hosted if not. So without further ado, I'm going to go back to ChatGPT, and I want to give you a little context here. So I created all this information in Notepad++. And what I did is I asked ChatGPT to go in and clean this up, organize it, make it more presentable, easier to read, and more focused. And some of the writing that I do is horrible. So this is the stuff that I had written before. And then I asked it to rewrite it, and I wanted it to be more organized and consistent for the template. So I had it kind of fix the template first before I even use the template. So what it is that I have defined the template on how I want to use this with Fantasy Grounds and with ChatGPT. So it says adventure template. So the first A, B, and C. So the title. So we want a unique and thematic title for the adventure. Lore and background, so we want detailed information about the setting, the theme, and backstory for the Game Master. And then the initial preparations would be the suggestion for party size, character levels, adventure tier level, and any other necessary or recommended materials. So that's the setup, the intro part for the Game Master before you start running the adventure. And then the adventure element. So this is a really important part, I think, that gets missed a lot in the content that we've been receiving for the last 5 to 10 years from different publishers, namely the Wizards of the Coast variety. I think Kobold Press and Pathfinder and the other publishers do a little bit better job, but essentially you have different parts of an encounter that are essential to running it. So if you are going to build an encounter or have some sort of thing added to your adventures, or you're going to homebrew, it's nice when you have a format that's set up and it's more universal and a little bit easier to read and not so scattered and such. So the template kind of helps with that too. So you start with adventure elements. So that's typically 1 to 5 areas. Depending on how big you want the adventure, you can obviously go more. One thing I wanted to warn you about with Chat GPT or anything like generative is there is a limit to how many characters that they can handle and remember. So if you get too deep in the weeds with your story and all the stuff you're building, you might want to break it up into pieces and compartmentalize it. So maybe make your story template first and then have separate conversations or separate areas over here, like on the left, that talks about the first chapter and the second chapter and that sort of thing. If you do it that way, you're less likely to run into that wall. What ends up happening is that hey Jeff, thanks for sub. But what ends up happening is yeah, get off my cloud, thank you. What ends up happening is you run out of memory, and ChatGPT starts generating stuff that has nothing to do with the topic. So you got to be kind of careful with that. They have expanded the character limit, though. There used to be like so many, they call them tokens, but essentially it's the length of the content, though, the conversation. And if you don't remind the ChatGPT what you were working on occasionally, you have to go back and kind of repost your template. If you don't do that, it's going to forget and it's going to be annoying. So, like I said, keep your conversation somewhat manageable. And if it's a big adventure or a big book or something you're writing, do it in chapters. Don't try to do it all in one conversation. So in the adventure template, you have your thematic title, lore and background, and then you're going to have the suggestion for party size, character level, adventure tier, any other materials like books or stuff. And then when you get to the adventure elements, I start off with 1 to 5 areas depending on what you're trying to do. Like for a one-shot, you probably only need like 3 areas. For an adventure that's going to be like 4 hours or longer, you might need like 5 areas or something like that. But these are generally adventures that you can complete in 1 to 3 sessions. In this case, I can either randomly or do a guided request from ChatGPT. So I can just give it like a theme and then have it write everything out using this guideline or this template. So I'd have the location title, the name of the area, location, or room. If applicable, I'd provide details about hazards, traps, setbacks, battle tactics, and loot. And then if you have information about treasure, loot, or if you gain information during the encounter, or if there's any potential harvesting opportunities, put all that there in the reward section. And then the aftermath, of course, would be the consequences and outcomes of the encounter. So then I have a whole separate section for NPCs. So this is for the use for the Fantasy Grounds import tool. So in Fantasy Grounds, I got a new session set up here. So I use this when I'm going to create content. It's separate from my campaign, and it's a work folder or a work session or game or whatever you want to call it. And this is what I'm going to use to build my content. I'm not going to do it in my game because I can mess it up, or I might have too many conflicting things going on and get confused and all kinds of stuff. So I generally don't build inside of a live campaign simply because it's difficult to manage, and that sort of thing is more incremental. So if you want to build like that, it's better if you have a separate campaign, copy and paste stuff in there and build it separately so you can create a module and export it. So that way, if you run the adventure again, you have all your notes and all the things that you've changed. But in this case, I'm just going to create a one-shot. So it's going to be a separate adventure. It's not attached to anything. The only extension I have is this font, this Roboto font. And I might use the author extension, but other than that, I don't need any other extension. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit start. So while that's loading, I'll go back to this where we're talking about the NPC stat block. So one of the things you can do in the 5th edition rule set, and also in other rule sets, they have other tools, but essentially you can take the stat block information and import it. And the formatting of the stat block text is very important. You don't want a bunch of colons and extra spaces and all kinds of different ways that the stats are displayed from different PDFs that you might be copying from. It really needs to be in this order. This is an exact science here. An extra period or like a hyphen or some kind of weird separator will cause issues with the parsing tool. So you're going to have to get used to that. Like traits and actions, they have to have this period after each one. So if it's an action like spellcasting or a melee attack, it has to have that period afterwards. And you don't want any hyphens or space or semicolons or anything like that. So all these little things, that nuances about the NPC stat block, will probably drive you bananas. But once you start getting used to how these are supposed to look by looking at others for examples, then you can kind of build your own template and use that as your guide. It'll help a lot when it comes to importing. As a matter of fact, these right here, the actions, I don't need that colon there. I just need to hit enter. I don't need, just put this trait underneath the actions. And same thing with like attacks and stuff. You don't need this actions colon spellcasting. You really would need this to just be hit enter and have spellcasting on a separate line with a period after it, and you would have actions on a separate line with no colon. So this is wrong as far as I'm concerned, because it will throw off the parsing if it's done this way. So when we get to the parsing part, I'll show you that and what I'm going to do to fix that. And I'll look at other things too, but the rest of the template, there's an outro, so to wrap the adventure up, summarizing the events and any outcomes. And then the epilogue would be a case where you might want to look into the future. You can also show the long-term effects of the adventure that happened and possibly setting up for future adventures. So I always like to provide that in my content if it makes sense. And that way I would have it expand beyond my first adventure, because technically if I kept to this format, I could just kind of build the adventure as I go and build each room at a time. And you could do it that way instead of coming top down where you're trying to build every single thing and then run it. Instead, you just build it as you go, and then you start tying things together. There's two ways to do it. You can start from the top down or the bottom up. So it just depends on how you run your adventures, how you write, and also what kind of time you have. So at the very end here, I put a note here. This is for more or less for defining things. So I said the template can be adapted for other systems with minor modifications by the GM. The NPC stat block is specifically formatted for the Fantasy Grounds Unity virtual tabletop platform and should not be altered. The dice notation, such as 1D with a pound on there, represents a single die roll of a given number with possible die rolls including, and I defined a D4 to a D100 for percentile dice. When creating lists for Fantasy Grounds import, so these would be the tables, use the pipe symbol to separate a dice roll number from the results and use two-digit result numbers like 00 equals 100, for example. So I gave an example. I just want a dice roll and a result for the header, and then each result would be a separate line with a two-digit number separated by a pipe. And if you do it this way, your tables, that will allow for the import tool to work, because Fantasy Grounds has a table import tool. So that's a really handy way of doing this. So I also noted avoid using colons, semicolons, indents, bullet points, or hyphens in the NPC stat block. And for tables, do not create code blocks or formatted tables. If you say anything about a table in ChatGPT, for some reason, it tries to build the code block, and I don't need the code block. I just need the text. So the code block, it looks really nice, but you don't generally need that. Unless you're maybe doing a PDF or something, it might be handy. But nonetheless, this is the template. So now that I have that in there, what I'm going to do is take all of this information and I'm going to copy and paste it into the Word document or the Notepad++, because I want to keep this information. So I'm going to hit copy there, and I'm going to go and start a new tab. And then I'll just hit Control V for all of the text. And I'm going to name the tab as, let's see, rename. And we're going to call this, we'll just say D&D 5e ADV temp. So I know that's an adventure template. And then hit OK. So I named the tab so I can find it again. And then I copied and pasted all the information all cleaned up. So now I can use this information to help others, or you guys can make your own kind of based on that. But essentially, you're defining how you want the ChatGPT or whatever program you're using to define the way it writes the content. So it's not just all over the place. It has a consistency and an order to it. And once you get used to doing that and using that specific order, it really makes adventure writing a lot cleaner and easier to do. And ChatGPT will do most of the typing. You have to put in some creative, input too. It doesn't do everything. You have to put in at least, your description of what you want and some of the basics, and then let it do its thing. So let's do that. So if anyone's watching right now, if you have a specific location or maybe a environment or perhaps a theme that you would like to use, I'd like to hear that soon. And then I will ask ChatGPT to create it based on the template that we're using above. So I'll start typing that. So I will say with little asterisks so it knows that this is what I'm requesting. I will say generate a one-shot adventure using the template above. So that'll be my first request, basically, is use the stuff up above in the previous conversation, or from the previous conversation, so it knows what I'm referring to. So instead of all of the previous conversations, it's just going to go with this one. And then I'm going to say set the theme as, well, maybe we'll do an Underdark. We'll say Forgotten Realms, just so we have something that is familiar to most people that play D&D. So Forgotten Realms setting located in the Underdark. And then we'll probably put something like, let's see, set the theme as this, located in the Underdark. I'll say the NPCs or encounter centers around, I'll just say the story, so not the NPCs. I'll say the story Yeah, I'm going to do that. So the story centers around a band of Dwergar scouts. These scouts are led by a well-trained warrior, and the rest of the band the rest of them are just like scouts and miners. So we have a rough idea. I'll say there are 5 Dwergar total. See, you have to give it some information. The way you kind of get, this is kind of more of a steered way of doing it, so it's not as random. And that way, you can have a little bit of control, kind of, I'd say a minor control. And I want to put that they were from Gracklsta. Let's see, Gracklsta. Okay, so make sure I got the spelling helps when you actually have it. So we'll say that they were originated from. There are 5 Dwergar total. They originated from the Dwergar city, and then I'll put Gracklestone. This way we have some semblance of understanding of what's happening. I'll put they're on their way to Skullport in Undermountain. To trade or something like that. To trade and gather information. So they're kind of like on an exploratory mission. And it's like a little party. They're doing lots of things, but one of them is to go to the Underdark area under the Undermountain, underwater deep. So let's see. So I'm going to add that to the dictionary. This one. Okay. So I think that's good enough. I don't want to give it too much, but then because then it kind of confines it. So generate a one-shot adventure using the template above from the previous conversation. Set the theme as a Forgotten Realms setting located in the Underdark. The story centers around a band of Dwergar scouts. The scouts are led by a well-trained warrior, and the rest of the band are scouts and miners. There are 5 Dwergar in total. They originate from the Dwergar city Gracklestone. They are on their way to Skullport and Undermountain to trade and gather information. So that's the encounter. That's what this whole thing is going to be built around. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And I could give it more of an overarching theme, but in this case, this is going to be kind of a one-shot thing, and I don't really care if it's attached necessarily at this point to anything in particular. So I'm not going to give it that, but if you have a big story, you want to mention that in the text in case you want to tie it in later with something else. So I'm going to go ahead and hit send message, and it will pull off the information from this content below, and then it will write out the stuff. So here it's already doing something kind of cool. So the title is Shadows of Gracklestone, A Journey to Skullport. So this adventure takes place in the Underdark of the Forgotten Realms setting. The story revolves around a band of Dwergar scouts from the city of Gracklestone. The band is led by a seasoned warrior and includes 4 other scouts and miners. Their mission is to travel to Skullport in Undermountain to trade and gather information. So now the initial preparation is that the adventure is designed for a party of 4 to 6 characters of levels 5 through 7. The adventure tier is tier 2. The GM should prepare for encounters in the Underdark, a subterranean environment filled with unique challenges and creatures. So what we have here is they just gave us one example out of maybe 2 or 3 that you could do, but basically this location is the Underdark. This is the journey from Gracklestone to Skullport. So in the details, the party may encounter various Underdark creatures, natural hazards, and possibly other Dwergar or Drow parties. The Dwergar band you will use their innate abilities such as invisibility and enlarge to gain advantages in combat and to navigate the Underdark. Traps may include cave-ins, poison, fungi, hidden traps. So the reward is that the party can obtain various Underdark minerals and gems from the Dwergar, as well as information about Skullport and the Underdark. They may also find maps and tools used by the Dwergar miners. The aftermath is the outcome of this adventure could affect the trade and political relations between Gracklestone and Skullport. The party's actions may also attract the attention of other Underdark denizens. So now we can go to the NPC. So it made the stat block for the Dwergar leader, this Thorgar Deep Shadow, and he is a CR3 challenge rating, so he's like some kind of warrior or fighter. He has a multi-attack, and he has War Pick and a Javelin, so it didn't quite do this the way I wanted because it wasn't formatted right. So this is wrong. I gotta fix that. Outro, as the party navigates... Okay, so it did a pretty good job. So most of that was... I think good. I think it's partly my fault because of the actual format. So I'm going to go back and see if I can edit this. So I'm going to just recopy and paste it, but I'm going to make some modifications. A couple things that I forgot. So I'm going to go back to the drawing board. And what I want to do is add for the adventure elements. Here's the location, encounter details, the reward, the aftermath, and NPCs are another section. So I want to put a space between there. And I want to put a read aloud section. So E. So this is a read aloud section. Basically, I want it to create a storyteller view of the area or the encounter. So that's definitely want that. That's very important. So I like having this in case I don't feel created, or I got writer's block or whatever. That's really helpful. So this is what you read aloud to your players essentially. And then for the template, I need to fix that because it's not right. So like for instance, this traits, it doesn't need that semicolon there or the colon. So I'm going to hit enter and shift, and then this is going to be a separate line. So I don't want it to be a part of the same line either. And then same thing with actions. So that's going to be its own line, and then spellcasting is the trait underneath it, or innate spellcasting or whatever, or some kind of melee attack, like multi-attack was one of them. Multi-attack. So I'll put a period after that. So these are the sorts of things that can really make this work hard if you're not, if you don't catch the stuff. And then reactions, I don't need to do that, but there's something that's missing here, and that's all that needs to go there. It doesn't need anything else. I don't need the semicolon. And then I want to add background to this also for this NPC, because sometimes you want to add a little bit of a background. And then I would say combat or item notes. So some NPCs are a little bit more complex, so you kind of want to have some kind of notes here for the GM if they're going to run it, and you're not certain if it's clear what the intent is of this. So combat or items, combat tactics, we'll say, and item notes or special item notes. I don't care about all the rest of the stuff, just any special items, I want that notated here. And then I'll go on the back of the stat block, so when they use this, it's not going to be so difficult to run, especially when you're new. Most of us that are been playing for a while, we kind of know how to wing it and do all this stuff. But I'm also thinking of players that are new to the game and trying to make it a little bit easier and inspirational so that when they're doing it, it's not such a big monumental task, and they've got some content to draw from. I'd rather have too much than too little information. It sucks when you got a basic stat block and it tells you, oh, just use this stat block, but do this, and that to it. It's like, well, why didn't you just do it? Really? So anyways, I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste this in. This is the new updated version. So you do have to play around with these until you get comfortable with how you want it to go. Now I'm going to have it redo this. So I'm just going to take my command or my request here, and I'm just going to recopy and paste it up here. So that's what I want to do, and I'll say use the new template above. Generate with the updated template above from the previous conversation. Okay, so I wanted to make sure it's pulling from that particular new updated version. I don't want it to pull from just anything. All right, so let's see what we get. And oh yeah, I want to add, before I do this, please generate more than one location. Generate 3 locations for this encounter. I want to see if it can do it, because sometimes it won't. It'll just give you 1, because that's the template is based on 1. So that's why it doesn't necessarily create it, but we'll see if it does it. Okay, so I just hit enter and I asked it to use the new template, and it's thinking right now. Echoes of the Underdark, the Dwergar's Past. So it changed the title a little bit. The adventure unfolds in the Underdark of the Forgotten Realms setting. The story revolves around a band of Dwergar. The band, led by a seasoned warrior, includes 4 other scouts. Their mission is to travel to Skullport in the Undermountain to trade and gather information. Okay, so it's Tier 2, 4 to 6 players, levels 5 through 7. And it is saying that the GM should prepare for encounters in the Underdark, a subterranean environment filled with unique challenges and creatures. So this will help give you an idea of what type of resources you might want to start getting together. Adventure elements. So the journey to Grackle stuff. So yeah, it only did 1 location, which is fine. I can do this again. So the party encounters that, the Underdark creatures, natural hazards, Dwergar, drow parties. The Dwergar band will use their innate abilities, such as invisibility, to enlarge to gain advantage in combat and to navigate Underdark. Traps may include cave-ins, poison fungi, and hidden pits. So the party can obtain various Underdark minerals and gems from the Dwergar, as well as information about Skullport and the Underdark. They may also find maps and tools used by the Dwergar miners, so that might be your loot there. The outcome of the adventure could affect trade and political relations. Okay, we already knew about that. The party's actions may also attract the attention of other Underdark denizens. So this is where you can get kind of creative. So what I would do with this, potentially, depending on how long I want the adventure, I can add a random table, and I could say something like, you know, there's probably a 60% chance that they'll attract another type of predator or a different encounter. Or maybe it's only a 40%. So you can make a table that says, okay, roll to see if this even occurs during when the party's making noises or if they camp overnight. And then you can also define the encounter, like make 4 different things that might show up. And they don't all have to be bad or evil. It could be a group of beneficial people that are trading, that have things that they can buy, sell, and trade, or maybe it's a rival a party or something like that. So each one of those options can make this go a little further. So if you're concerned about needing more content and you're in the middle of running this, you can have that little side encounter, like a side adventure, and we can develop that here once we have the main piece of it. And then I'll probably develop 2 other locations. That way, once they leave this area, they can go to another area and then possibly a 3rd area where they might have a big encounter or fight. So this first encounter doesn't necessarily have to result in battles, which is kind of a neutral one. The second encounter, I think, will be more like a puzzle or a trap or some sort of treasure or something like that. And then the 3rd one, of course, will be some kind of combat or some kind of forced piece of this where you actually have to fight your way out or something. And then let's see what they did with the stat block. Yes. So it did most of this right, but see, it's trying to do whatever it feels like here. And we don't want that, because that's what breaks the parsing. So I'm going to take this information, and what I'm going to do is expand upon it, but I'm also kind of breaking the format, but I want to do that so I have my locations, and then I also have the correct stat block. And it only made 1. So it only made Thorgar. I wanted to make the one of the others too. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, let's see if this is the correct. I want to grab this. Yeah, so this is correct here on how we did this, but it's just, yeah, it's not quite generating the stat block the way I hope. But what I'm going to do is take this information, the stat block, and I'm going to paste it down here. Tactics. Let's see, tactics. Okay. So what I'm going to do is tell it to fix that. So I'm going to say something like shift. I'll say create an NPC stat block for the Dwergar leader. What's his name? Rogar or something like that. I can't remember. It's too new. Yeah, Thorgar. I'll say for the leader Thorgar. He is armed with 5 javelins. And what was the other weapon that he had? The war pick. And for the sake of completeness, a dagger. He is also wearing I'm going to go with mithril chain. That way he gets a little bit better armor class. Okay, so create an NPC stat block for the Dwergar leader, Thorgar. He's armed with 5 javelins, war pick, and a dagger. He is also wearing mithril chainmail armor. I'll say also create the scout and miner Dwergar NPC stat block 2, or in addition. Alright, so maybe it'll fix that. Okay, so we're going to tell it to use the stat block below. Okay, so 2, using the exact template below, because it was starting to just do whatever it wants, and that's something that you'll fight occasionally with ChatGPT or generative. It is not always going to do exactly what you say, but you have to word it in such a way so it knows not to stray too much. So create that. Yeah, it can get kind of aggravating sometimes, but you have to remember it's just AI. You're kind of at its mercy. So let's see. So here's the, let me double check this, make sure this is right. Yeah, so this is exactly the format. So I'm going to say use the exact NPC stat block format for Fantasy Grounds Unity parsing, because requirements. So that way, tell it, hey, use the way we have it. Don't do whatever the heck you want. I don't know if it does any good, but it seems to have in the past. Okay, so that's good. So I'm going to go ahead and hit that. Sometimes after you've done all this, you might as well have just written it yourself in some cases. So it looks like, so far, is it doing it right? Yep, so far. Oh, no. Yeah, I don't like what it did here. Yeah, so sunlight sensitivity, Dwergar resilience, Dwergar magic. Yeah, I need it to expand those. And here's the miners. Okay, I'm going to stop generating. And I don't want. I'm going to tell it to list the traits. Don't just give me the names of them. Yeah, I don't want it in that short form. I can just do it myself. So list all the traits in long format, not just titles. That's what it did, essentially. That irritates me. It's being lazy, like me. Okay, so we're okay. So that's that. So I'm just going to save and submit. So what I did is I stopped it because I realized it wasn't doing what I asked it to. And I just went back and refined my question to it. So far it looks right. Yep. Yep, there we go. That's exactly what I wanted. So it listed them out in long format and it didn't abbreviate it. So that's good. See, now it has all of those different things included, which is what you want. Yeah, invisibility, enlarge. Yep, exactly. Multi-attack, war pick, javelin, dagger, background, combat tactics. Okay, so that's right. And now it's making the Dwergar Scout. So let's see how it does with these. So these are just the smaller guys, you know, the ones that are not in charge. There are 4 others. Okay, yeah, so far it's looking good. So yeah, I like it. So this is what we'll do is we'll take this information and copy and paste it into the parsing tool. And hopefully it comes out right. We'll see what it looks like when we get to that point. Yeah, there's the scout. Javelins. Do they also have a dagger? Nope. That's good because I didn't ask for that. Okay, they're loyal to their leader, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so what I'm going to do is take the stat block information that it put out for us and copy and paste it. So this is going to be for just the leader. And he's a named individual, so we'll make him a separate stat block. So when you go into the Fantasy Grounds, you know, for a new campaign, when this comes up, I'm just going to go ahead and load the SRD only. I don't need all the books. Not now, anyways. And then I'm just going to hit finish, and that just loads the SRD. So I have something to work with. And then I'm going to take and go to campaign, and then we're going to go to NPCs. So this already has some NPCs from the SRD in there, so you have something to kind of look at and work with. But I'm going to create my own group, and the reason you do this is in case you want to export this content, you're going to put it all underneath this category or this header. So I'll just call this Underdark Adventures or something like that. Don't really have a title, but that's what I'm going to call this. And then that way you have a working folder or a separation, a group, so that when you're creating your own content, it's separated from all the other stuff. It's still a part of the campaign, but it's under a separate header. And now there's an import tool at the bottom, import text. So you click that. This is the built-in import tool for Fantasy Grounds. Now on the left is where the stat block information goes. On the right is all the other stuff like the background and pictures and all that stuff. So I'm going to hit Control V as in Victor, and that puts all that in there. The one caveat is I'm going to take the combat tactics and the background out. So I'm just going to copy and paste and put that up here, and then I'm going to hit enter, and then I'm going to put the guy's name. It's this Thorgar or whatever his name is. Yeah, Thorgar Deep Shadow. And on the right-hand side, you can format, so I can make this a bold. So I highlighted the text, and then I hit Control-2, and that's the shortcut to change that to a header. And then I highlighted this background and hit Control-B, and then combat tactics or special item notes. I'm going to put Control-B for bold. So those are just some things that will be included. And then I want to erase the ones down here in the stat block information. That'll throw off the parsing tool. And if you want to see the kind of the cleanup that it does that this tool does, is you right click and hit cleanup text. And it'll take out all the extra information, the headers, extra spaces, you know, all the weird stuff. And I can do the same on the right hand side. So it's all cleaned up now. And I'm going to take a double check here of the stat, so that looks right. And I'm looking at the period, yep. And large with period at the end. Yep, everything looks correct. That's good. Multi-attack, war pick. Yep, it looks right. Whoa, what do you know? Okay, so once you do that, I'm going to go ahead and hit import. And so far, it looks good. You can kind of tell based on where things are. And here's the actions. Yeah, really cool. So it looks good there. So when you're done, you can lock the sheet if you want. And I'm going to put, I'm going to change his name a little bit. Instead of Dwergar Warrior Leader, I'm going to put Dwergar. I don't need to put leader there. And I'll just put Dwergar in parentheses so they know that it's based on a Dwergar stat block and then his actual official name. That way the title's not 50 miles long. And then when you want to look at this NPC, kind of expand it out, I'm going to compress it a little bit. So it's a challenge rating 3, the 2 proficiency, and then 700 XP. And then if I go to the other tab, this is what it looks like. So you get that background and the stuff that we had put for the DM. And then you get this summary, which is really nice looking. So you'll notice some products have the summary, some won't. So it depends on when the product was converted, but when they added the tools to import content into Fantasy Grounds, this is the newer format. So if you look at older books, this background information will be a little different. You won't have the summary. It'll just be like some notes and a link to a photo. But in this case, it looks like it's going to be, it's going to be pretty nice. So what I'm going to do now is I want to make some artwork for this. So generally speaking, I would do all the stat blocks first and then do the artwork, or do the artwork first, which is actually easier, and then do all the stat blocks. That way you're not switching back and forth between making stories and then going into, making a table and then coming back to a story. That's where it starts taking a long time. But for the case of this actual stream, I'm going to be kind of jumping around to show you different things. So that looks really good. I'm really impressed. That's the way you want it to look. And if you want to test these things out, you want to bring up the combat tracker, and then you can left click and drag the NPC into that area where the combat tracker is, and then expand the offense, and you can see all the different things here. And that looks right. That's how you can tell if it parsed correctly. And this is what you want to see when you're done. So that's how you check your NPC, especially like these boss types where they got a lot of different actions, spells, and that sort of thing. Now we can do the basic one, so that should be very similar. So if I'm going to hit, I'm going to close it for right now, and then reopen it. That kind of clears it. Go back to the stat block area, and I'm just going to grab the one for the regular. So when I make an encounter, it's kind of all, at least that part's done. So I hit Control Copy, and then I'm going back into Fantasy Grounds. I hit Control V as in Victor, and it's going to kind of take a look, make sure. I'm going to right click, clean up the format, make sure they don't have any weird punctuation that's going to throw it off. So far it looks good. I want to take the background again and the combat tactics and just Control Copy, Control V, and get rid of it. I don't want it in the stat block information. That'll throw that off. So that looks pretty good. And then this stuff here, I'm going to go ahead and add Dwergar Scout. And then what I'm going to do is do the same formatting. So Control 2 for this header type thing, and Control B for this little bold. And that's it. And then I'm going to hit import. So once you understand how the tool works and understand what this formatting is supposed to look like, this gets a lot easier over time. Initially, it's a pain in the ass because you're looking at this and going, okay, and you're copy and paste it directly from a PDF, and it's going to look different. And if it's in any other format other than the Wizards of the Coast format in this case, it will throw off the parsing tool. So you go ahead and import, and it looks right. I can already tell. So all this stuff is separated out correctly. If you have something broken, all this stuff will be jumbled up. It'll be in the wrong place. And then let's go back to the other, and it looks good. So now we have the Dwergar Scouts and the leader. So what's nice about this is when you have all your encounters that you want to build next. So if this is going to be an encounter, Again, I'm going to create a category or a section. So we're going to call this Underdark Adventures, just like we did with the one above it. Let's see, Underdark, Underdark, Underdark Adventures. Okay. And once you have that, now what you can do is you can create a couple different types of encounters if you want, in case you need variation or you're trying to adjust for something. But in this case, a regular encounter, we'll say Dwergar Scouts was what we'll call this. Actually, there was a title. Let's see what that was. There was a cool title. I liked it. It was something March of the... I don't remember. Echoes of the... Yeah, there we go. The Dwergar's Path. So, yeah, that's just the name of the encounter. So let's call this... we'll just say Dwergar Scouts. So what this is basically just a generic encounter. So we'll drag the scouts from the NPC area. So I'm going to drag the scouts, and then we're going to drag the leader. And then what we'll do is we'll say, let's go with, that was 4. Okay, so there's 4 there. And then we're going to hit refresh, and it's a CR5 encounter worth 1500 XP. So that's calculated from the stat blocks. Now, this is kind of a static encounter. So in other words, no matter what, this is what it's going to be. But if you want to expand on this, what you can do is always say, you can define like a random encounter that is defined by the number of party members. Now, it won't take in consideration your CR levels and such, but at least for the party count, it can adjust for that. So far, the median is 4, but what we can do is create a random encounter. So this is off of the main encounter up here on the left. So what this will do is give us another option to generate an encounter that'll somewhat scale itself to the amount of players that you have joined on your table. So I'm going to go ahead and hit this group again, do the drop down, rename it. This is going to be Underdark Adventures. So there's a pattern here. If you can see, you put all this stuff under these headers, and it will help organize your content and separate it out from all the other stuff you got going on. So this is the random encounters. It kind of works similarly. But what we're going to do is we're going to call this a scaled Dwergar Scouts. So it's similar to what we just did. It's just that this will auto-scale or somewhat auto-scale the encounter. So what we're going to do is drag over these same NPCs. So we want 1 scout, and then we're always going to have the leader. So we'll leave that in there. So what's going to happen is for Dwergar, I'm going to put 1 because he's always going to be there anyways. But for the Dwergar Scouts, what we can do is kind of scale it. So there'll be 1 less than there are party members. That way it kind of balances out. So what we'll do is we'll put $PC. Oops, that's the pound symbol. I want the $sign. Okay, so $PC -1. So what that'll do is it'll look at the party sheet, and this only works if you have the party sheet set up. So if you have your players on the party sheet, so after you put them on the combat tracker, you put them on the party sheet. That's one of your setup things. But once you do that, when you roll this, it'll generate an encounter based off the number of PCs in your group. So this $PC -1 will actually give you up to 5 scouts depending on the size of your party. So if you have 6 players, you're going to get 5 scouts. If you've got 4 players, you're going to have 3 scouts, and then you're adding on the leader too. So that's kind of a nice way to plan and set up encounters. So that way you don't always have a static one. and you have a little bit higher replay value, so you don't have to adjust this one. This will adjust itself based on the number of players at your table. So if you only got 3 players, you're only going to get 2 scouts. You'll always have the leader, but in this case, you're going to have a couple scouts if you only have 3 people. And that kind of helps balance the encounter. You can do other things like multiply, add. I can add +1 instead of -1. You can, multiply fractions. You can do all kinds of stuff. You can divide. You can say half the number of PCs for the, for the minions, that sort of thing. So it just depends on what you want to do, but that's a nice function, especially if you're going to run this encounter more than once for more than one group. So I honestly think like Adventure League and Organized Play would design would be better to have this sort of thing to help balance out the encounter instead of manually having to do it during the middle of the game. Because I can just as easily unlock this and change the number before I add it to the combat tracker. But that would be really nice if you pull up the encounter, you click generate, it brings up the encounter based off the number of PCs. So this didn't generate anything because I don't have any PCs. But if I did, it would give me 1 less. And if it was only 1 player, it would still just give me 1. So, it's not going to give you 0 if you have 1 player. But if you have, 1, 2, or 3, you're always going to have at least 1 NPC minion. So that's a really nice feature. So now we're going to expand on this a little bit more to make this more exciting. So we're going to use ChatGPT to help us generate a picture we'll do for Thorgar here. So I'm going to go back to the Midjourney or the ChatGPT. And what I'm going to do is going to ask it to create a stat block, or not a stat block, but a picture for the NPC or for this encounter. So what I'm going to do is I'll let you know ahead of time before I do this that I do have a plugin. And one of the plugins is for the Midjourney app. So if you have ChatGPT 4.0, there's a plugin that you can use that's free, and it will generate a picture based off of the input. So what I'm going to say is you have to trigger it. So I'm going to say create a prompt for the Midjourney app, something like that. So what this is create a prompt for the Midjourney app. I'll say AI app. Okay, then I'm going to tell it the topic. So what I want it to do is create a scene with the information above for inspiration and content. So I'm just going to tell it to pull from this encounter to create a scene. And I'll give it a little bit more precision. So I'll say above for inspiration and content. Okay, so create a prompt for Midjourney AI app, create a scene. I'll say create a dramatic scene because I want it to be kind of dramatic. Let's see, a dramatic scene with the information above. So yes, I want the drama. I want it to look like it's an action shot, not just a picture. So we'll see what it gives us. So once I do that, it's going to trigger the plugin to work. So the plugin is going to, I guess I didn't enable it, but that's okay. But there's a plugin that you can do that, that would basically give you this information in more of a prompt format. Fortunately, I kind of already know what to do. So what I'm going to do is take this information, and I'm going to copy it. Okay, this is really lengthy. You don't want this sort of length for a prompt for ChatGPT or for the Midjourney app. But I'm going to go to, this is, the Midjourney app works in the Discord. So I have a private channel for my Midjourney prompts. So I'm going to hit /imagine, which is how you start the prompt. Then I'm going to hit control. Actually, I'm going to use a different feature. This is kind of new. What I'm going to do is a thing called shorten. So what this does is it will shorten your prompt up and just give you the more important parts of it and get rid of the stuff that's going to confuse the actual program. So let's see what it gives us. So here it is. Now it gives you this sort of breakdown of really a smaller prompt that's not going to be so crazy. So I'm going to pick number 1 and I'll click on it. And now it's asking me if I want to make any changes. So I'll just say a dramatic scene with a group yeah, I'll just do that. I'll see what it does. So I want to say fantasy. Actually, I'll say I want it to be really high quality. So 32K UHD, which is a setting. And then I want to put award-winning fantasy art or something like that. Award-winning fantasy art. And then I guess we'll put tenebrous, which is kind of a dark way of creating this. And then I'll do the aspect ratio. So here's where you kind of get into things. So you can make it a rectangular shape, but I think I'm going to make it square because it's a lot more universal. And if you want to use it for social media or share it with somebody else, 1080 by 1080 is a good starting point. 1920 by 1080 is good, but it depends on where you're going to use it. So in this case, I'm just going to use a square. And then I want to tell it I don't want anything modern looking, or I do not want cartoons, or I don't want logos or anything like that in the picture. That if you do that negative no prompt, it helps with that. You don't always need that, but if you start seeing stuff that you don't like once in a while it'll create this and it'll look like a cartoon. I don't really want that look. So I'm going to hit submit. We'll see what we get. Oh, it doesn't. I did something wrong. So I need to copy this again. I did something wrong with the parameter. AR11 1.1. That's what it was. It needs a colon, not the dot. Okay. So now right slash, what was that? Imagine prompt. Okay. Let's do it. All right, so it's thinking. So while it's thinking, just want to let you know that a lot of this takes time to learn the limitations and how to incorporate it into your own content. But once you get proficient with it and you understand the limitations and all the little nuances, it really makes this content creation a lot quicker. So if I was a little bit more organized and I didn't have explanations and stuff going on, I'd probably already be done with it. It wouldn't take this long. So that's something that will get better with time. So it's thinking right now. We'll see what it gives us. Excuse me. Mainly I want it to just give us the underdark terrain, the scenery, the faint glow of luminescent fungi, the flames of your torches. So this will give kind of more of a background. I would want to say like a kind of more ambiance and like a background for artwork. So we'll use this in Fantasy Grounds to our advantage if there's anything that it creates that's useful. Sometimes it creates crap and you can't use any of it. But once in a while you'll find something really good and you'll want to use it in your content. So this is something that we could use to supplement our game as a handout. Or maybe this will be instead of having a battle map, maybe we'll just use this picture to set up the encounter so it looks, more interesting. Yeah, it already looks pretty good so far. I mean, I like the way it's looking so far. So let's take a look at these. So you can pop this out and that looks too numerous, like there's way too many people. This one here on the far right looks a little bit more useful. But this could also be a view of something else. So if I use anything here, it would probably be number 4 at the most. And then what I can do here is make a basically make another copy of it and have it do something different. So what I'll do is I'll have it make a I'll break this out. This is a variation, a dramatic scene with a party with an adventure party of 5 that is traveling in the treacherous terrain of the Underdark for days now. I want to put fungi and strange roots in the background, because I kind of want to bring that out more, because this looks like total cavern, like almost like volcanic, and I don't mind that, but I want some of that fungus in there. Maybe it's kind of humid in there or something. Let's see, the air is cold, damp. Okay, I'll just leave that. We don't want cartoons, logos, and I want to say a medium, so a dramatic scene, I'll say a medium shot of a dramatic scene with an adventuring party of 5 that is traveling. Okay, so that's a little long, but it'll work. So I'm going to hit submit, and it'll take that information and kind of sculpt it the way we want it to. And then you can also, instead of just doing this, you can zoom out now. So you can zoom out like 1.5 times or 2 times if you want a little bit bigger area. Or you can do some weird randomization like a remix. This is strong, so we'll see what that gives us. So this is kind of random. You have like a subtle and a strong. So I'm having it doing a remix of this picture with a lot of extreme parameter changes, and it's random. Yeah, strong variations. We'll see if it gives us anything interesting. So far, I'm liking what I see here. So it looks like it is adding in some of the roots, which is what I wanted. I want it to look a little bit more natural and less this one's all work stone and natural cavern. I wanted a little bit more life in it than just that. Here is the remix of it, which isn't too bad. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, so this is more along the lines of something I would use. Probably this one on the bottom left or this one on the top left, because that has about 4 or 5 people in it. So I probably use this one and maybe this bottom one, number 3. So once that generates those, you can use those for your homebrew. And then this stuff here, where's that generated one going? So this is the variations. There's one that's kind of already going. Where did that one go? Yeah, see, this one has too many. I don't want 50,000 people. I wanted this one. That was the one that was generated recently. This is the one I wanted. So 1 and 3. Yeah, so I might use this as the encounter thing without needing a map. So maybe this one. I'm going to open this up in the browser, hit copy image, then go to Fantasy Grounds, and come over here to your assets, which is where everything's stored. So library, assets, and you want to click on folder, and what you'll find is all these different rule sets. So let me first save my work, so it creates a campaign folder, and make sure I'm on images, and then click on folder. And I wonder what happened there. The system cannot be find the file specified, whatever. Okay, so I just want to go to folder. No? It's giving me grief. Let me close this again. Go back to modules, or to library. There, go to folder. Yeah, I don't know. It's not letting me add anything to that folder. That looks like something I need to report. So I'm going to click on compile logs and send that to Smiteworks later, because I don't know what's going on. I should technically be able to open that folder up. Let me see if I can go into the data folder. Yeah, it's not letting me open that folder at all. So I don't know what's happening, but basically I'm not going to be adding that image anytime soon. All right, so that's that. So I think I'll call it now. I've had enough. I'm going to report this bug to Fantasy Grounds, because technically I should be able to go to images and click folder and not have this come up. So I don't know what's going on with it. All right, so anyways, you take care, folks. Hopefully the chat GPT was useful, as well as the template, and I'll try to remember to put the example of the templates that I was using for the show.